Hello, my name is Ryan Whitmore, 40 years old, currently a Master Sergeant in the United States Army stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. If you ask me where I'm from, I'll say Rockford, Illinois, but don't expect me to wax nostalgic about it. Rockford to me isn't a hometown to cherish. It's a long, cold shadow that always tries to pull me back just when I think I've broken free. I grew up in a family where love, if it existed at all, came with conditions, and I, the eldest son, never seemed good enough to be loved without having to prove myself. Our house sat at the end of Chestnut Street, in an old working-class neighborhood where rusted tin roofs creaked every time the wind blew. My father, Douglas Whitmore, was a mechanic, a tall man with rough hands and a piercing stare that could make anyone tremble. He took pride in the Whitmore name, as if we were descendants of some great general, though in reality we were just ordinary laborers scraping by on sweat and bitterness. My father wanted everyone to respect him, and he placed that expectation on the shoulders of his two sons, me and Derek, my younger brother, 4 years my junior. But his expectations weren't fair. With Derek, he was gentle, indulgent, as if my brother was the only light in his life. Derek could mess up, act out, or squander money, and Dad would always make excuses. "He's young, he needs time," he'd say, even as Derek grew into a lazy, debt-ridden 36-year-old who did nothing but cause trouble. Me? I was the one lacking leadership qualities, according to Dad. Every time I tried to do something, whether it was getting good grades at school or fixing an old bike in the garage, he'd look at me with suspicion as if I was trying to show him up. My mother, Marjorie, was a supermarket cashier, a petite woman with once blonde hair faded by years of exhaustion. She lived in silence, like a faint shadow in our home. She never argued with Dad, no matter how much he yelled or threw things. I used to think she loved me, but her love was as fragile as morning dew. Whenever I needed her to stand up for me, she'd just bow her head, muttering something about keeping the peace. Peace. To me, that was just her way of siding with Dad and Derek, leaving me to face every injustice alone. I vividly remember one evening when I was 15, sitting at the dinner table with a bowl of cold soup. Derek, 11 at the time, broke Mom's favorite vase, a rare keepsake from Grandma. I had warned him not to mess around, but he just laughed, tossing a rubber ball that shattered the vase. When Dad stormed in, he yelled, but not at Derek. He turned to me, pointing in my face. "Can't you keep an eye on your brother?" "Useless." I tried to explain, but he only got angrier. Derek sat there, smirking, as if he knew he'd never be blamed. That moment carved itself into my heart like a wound that never heals. Growing up in that family, I learned to stay quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because no one wanted to listen. I studied hard, did odd jobs to earn pocket money, and dreamed of escaping Rockford one day. But that dream wasn't easy. My parents didn't have money for college, or rather, they didn't want to. "College is expensive, just work in a factory like me," Dad said, his tone commanding. Meanwhile, Derek got new clothes, basketball lessons, even though he was never serious about anything. When I was 20, I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny room staring at my face. Tired eyes, short brown hair, and a decision that had been brewing inside me. I couldn't stay there another day. I had quietly researched the military, reading every pamphlet I could find at the recruitment center. That night, I came home and called the family into the living room to announce my decision. Standing in the middle of the room, hands clasped tightly, I tried to keep my voice steady. "I've decided to enlist," I said, looking straight at Dad. "I'm joining the U.S. Army. I want to build my own future." Silence. Then Dad burst out laughing, a cold, cutting laugh that stabbed at my heart. "Enlist?" he sneered, his eyes gleaming with contempt. "What do you think you'll do in the military, Ryan? A nobody kid who's not smart enough for college, now dreaming of being a soldier? You'll quit in a month like everything else you've ever done." He stood up, stepping toward me, his breath reeking of beer. "You don't have the guts to be anything great. Don't embarrass the Whitmore name with that stupid idea." I turned to Mom, hoping for even the smallest sign of support. But she just sat there, eyes fixed on the floor, lips pressed tight. "Mom?" I called, my voice almost breaking. She looked up, but her gaze was empty, as if she were looking through me. "Listen to your father, Ryan," she said softly, without emotion. "You're not the type to do big things. Stay here, work at the factory, it's more stable." Derek, sitting in the corner, snickered. "Wanna play hero, huh?" he mocked. "Bet you'll come crying back to Mom when the drill sergeant yells at you." I stood there, feeling the floor collapse beneath me. Their words weren't new. I'd heard the taunts my whole life, but this time they cut like razors, slicing through the last scraps of hope I had. I wanted to scream, to tell them I didn't need their approval, that I'd prove them wrong. But I just clenched my fists, swallowed my anger, and turned away. "I'm going," I said, my voice low but firm, "and I won't come back begging anyone." The next day I packed a few clothes, a notebook, and my meager savings, then headed to the recruitment center. "I want to enlist," I told the officer, my voice trembling but resolute. That day I walked out of Rockford, leaving behind a family that was never truly mine. Dad's mocking words echoed in my head, but instead of breaking me, they became fuel. I would prove myself, not for them, but for me. The early days in the military were a nightmare. I was thrown into the training center at Fort Benning, Georgia, where the humid heat soaked my shirt with sweat even when I stood still. The drill instructors, burly men with voices like thunder, gave me no moment of rest. "Whitmore, are your legs made of mud? Move it," they barked as I struggled through the obstacle course. I gritted my teeth, crawling through mud, scaling walls, my hands bloodied from rope burns. Each night, lying on a rock-hard bunk bed, I told myself, "You can't quit. Not here. Not because of them." But the battlefield was where I was truly tested. In 2005, I was deployed to Iraq, a 25-year-old infantryman who had never seen death up close. We were patrolling a dusty road near Baghdad, the sun scorching, the air heavy with the smell of oil and smoke. I was at the rear of the squad, my M4 rifle gripped tightly, eyes scanning for danger. Then a deafening explosion shook the ground. A roadside bomb detonated less than 10 meters from our team. I hit the dirt, ears ringing, sand stinging my face. My squadmate Ramirez was screaming, his voice drowned out by distant gunfire. I crawled to Ramirez, dragging him into a narrow alley as bullets whizzed around us. "Stay here!" I shouted, checking his wound, a piece of shrapnel lodged in his leg, blood soaking his pants. I tore off a strip of my shirt, tying it tightly around the wound, trying to recall my first aid training. "You're gonna be okay, Ramirez," I said, though my heart pounded, fearing I was lying. I looked around and saw our squad leader lying motionless a few meters away, with the enemy still firing from a distance. No one was in charge. No one was giving orders. I took a deep breath, feeling time slow down. "I'm not some useless soldier," I told myself, hearing my father's voice in my head. I shouted to the rest of the squad, "Regroup, move to the safe point now." I don't know where I found the confidence, but I led the team's retreat, firing back while dragging Ramirez along. When we reached a crumbled wall, a drone arrived to provide support, and the enemy withdrew. Ramirez survived, and we didn't lose anyone else. In the years that followed, I climbed the ranks from private to master sergeant. Each promotion reminded me of my father's contemptuous look, and I told myself, he was wrong. I learned to lead, to stay calm in chaos, to protect those who depended on me. But I also learned that the battlefield wasn't just out there. It was inside me, where I fought the memories of Rockford, of a family that never believed in me. At Fort Carson, I met Melissa. She worked in the base's medical office, her brown hair tied high, her smile warming the Colorado cold. The first time we talked, she was bandaging a cut on my hand. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "You're the only one who didn't complain when I disinfected the wound, Master Sergeant." I laughed for the first time in months, feeling a spark of warmth creep into my heart. Melissa was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She didn't ask about my past or push when I fell silent, but she had a way of seeing through me, as if she knew how deep my scars ran. We started dating, walks by the lake, coffee at a small shop in Colorado Springs. I told her about the military, about sleepless nights in the field, but I avoided mentioning Rockford. She didn't press, just held my hand and said, "When you're ready, I'll listen." After 3 years, I proposed to Melissa on a hill overlooking the Rocky Mountains under a blazing red sunset. She said yes before I could finish, and we hugged, laughing like kids. But life wasn't always easy. My family, though hundreds of miles away, still found ways to creep into our lives like a shadow that never faded. My parents called occasionally, not to check on me, but to ask for money. "Derek needs cash to pay off gambling debts," Mom would say, her voice trembling as if pleading. "Just $2,000, Ryan. You're the eldest. You have to help your brother." Another time, Dad called, his voice thick with anger. "You think you're better than this family? Derek's struggling and you're just hoarding money for yourself." Each call was a knife to the gut. I sent money a few times, small amounts from my savings, hoping they'd leave me alone. But they never did. Derek, the spoiled younger brother, always had a new excuse. Another debt, a failed investment, or just needing cash to start over. I remember one time Mom called while Melissa and I were having dinner. "Derek got fired," she said. "He needs $3,000 for rent. Just this once, Ryan, please." I looked at Melissa, who shook her head slightly, not out of selfishness, but because she knew I was being used. "Mom, I can't," I said, my voice heavy. "Melissa and I are saving for a house." She went silent, then hung up, leaving me with guilt I knew I didn't deserve. Those calls drained me. Melissa noticed me tossing and turning at night, and she started stepping in. One night, when Mom called at midnight, Melissa grabbed the phone from my hand. "Mrs. Marjorie, this is Melissa," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Ryan's done all he can. If Derek needs money, let him figure it out. Please don't call again." I stared at her, shocked and grateful. Mom didn't call back for months, but I knew they wouldn't give up easily. Life got harder when we decided to buy an apartment in Colorado Springs. We set our sights on a small place, not luxurious, but enough to call home. The bank required a $10,000 down payment, a huge sum for 2 people living on government salaries. I took extra shifts at the base, pulling night duty, while Melissa worked weekends at a private clinic. Some days we only saw each other for a few minutes, but she always smiled, held my hand, and said, "We're a team, Ryan. We'll make it." After 8 months of grueling work, we scraped together the down payment. The day we signed the contract for the apartment, I stood in front of the small house with its wooden porch, feeling like I'd conquered a mountain. Melissa squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "This is our home," she said. "No one can take it away." I nodded, pulled her into a hug, and felt a peace that had eluded me through all those months of hard work. But that peace, I soon realized, was more fragile than I thought. One Friday evening, after a long day training the team at the base, I sat in my small office, reviewing the week's reports. The dim fluorescent light cast a glow over the scratched wooden desk. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. I glanced at the screen, Mom's number. My heart sank. It had been 3 years since her last call, and every time it was either to ask for money or to guilt me for forgetting the family. I let the phone ring a few more times, my finger hovering over the decline button. But for some reason, I pressed answer. "Ryan?" Mom's voice was frail, trembling, unlike her usual self. "You have to come home, Derek. He's in big trouble." I gripped the phone, feeling like a rock had just dropped into my chest. Derek. Always Derek. The little brother I'd tried to forget, just as I'd tried to forget Rockford. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my voice dry, though I already had a hunch. Mom hesitated, then spoke quickly as if afraid I'd hang up. "He owes money, Ryan. Gambling debts, a lot of money. The lenders are threatening to sue, maybe even do something to him if he doesn't pay up. Your dad's called a family meeting and relatives are coming. You have to come, Ryan. You're the eldest." I closed my eyes, trying to breathe evenly. The eldest. The word tasted bitter. The eldest, but never treated like part of the family. "Mom, I have work," I said, struggling to stay calm. I can't just drop everything to fix Derek's mess. He's grown, you know that. There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice turned sharp, almost pleading. Don't you get it? This is family. Your dad says if you don't come, you're not worthy of the Whitmore name. Do you want us all to be humiliated? Her words hit like a punch, reminding me of Dad's mocking laugh when I told him I wanted to enlist. I wanted to yell into the phone that I owed them nothing, that I'd built this life without them. But I only said, I'll think about it, and hung up. I sat there staring at the phone's dark screen. The room was quiet, but my mind was a storm. I thought of Derek, the spoiled brother who always caused trouble and hid behind our parents. I thought of the apartment Melissa and I had worked so hard for. And I thought of Rockford, where every memory felt like a scar. But Mom's voice, the desperation in it, clung to me like a thorn. I knew if I didn't go, they wouldn't leave me alone. They'd call again, guilt me, try to drag me back into the pit I'd escaped 20 years ago. When I got home that night, Melissa was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of fragrant tomato soup. She looked up, her smile bright as always, but it faded when she saw my face. "What's wrong, Ryan?" she asked, setting the spoon down. I sat at the table and recounted Mom's call, word for word, as if speaking it aloud would lighten the weight in my chest. Melissa listened without interrupting, gently holding my hand. When I finished, she looked at me, her eyes both tender and resolute. "You don't owe them anything, Ryan," she said, "but I know you. You won't find peace until you face this. If you want to go, I'll go with you." I looked at her, feeling both gratitude and pain. Melissa was the only person in the world who truly understood me, even the wounds I never spoke of. I didn't want her to step into the mess of my family, but the thought of her by my side gave me the strength to face anything. "You don't have to come," I said, but she shook her head. "We're a team, Ryan. If you're going to Rockford, I'm going with you." The next morning, I requested a short leave. My commander, Colonel Harris, peered at me over his thick glasses, eyebrows raised. "Family, Whitmore?" he asked, his tone skeptical. I nodded, offering little explanation. He signed the leave form but added, "Don't let personal matters affect your work. You're one of my best." His words were both encouragement and pressure. I knew I couldn't let the base, my team, or myself down. But I also knew Rockford was waiting, and it wouldn't welcome me with open arms. The flight from Colorado Springs to Chicago was short, but to me it felt like a century. Melissa sat beside me, her hand clasped tightly in mine, saying nothing. I stared out the plane window, watching white clouds drift by, wondering what I was doing. Why was I going back? To save Derek? To please my parents? Or just to prove I wasn't the kid they belittled 20 years ago? I had no answers, but with every mile closer to Rockford, a knot tightened in my chest. When we landed in Chicago, I rented a car and drove to Rockford. The familiar road stretched before me. Endless cornfields, faded billboards, and the dusty Midwest smell. Melissa gazed out the window, occasionally sharing stories of her childhood trips to ease my tension. But I only nodded. My mind pulled back to the house at the end of Chestnut Street. When we pulled up to the house, I barely recognized it. The paint was peeling, the front yard overrun with weeds, and the rusted tin roof looked ready to collapse. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a relic of the past I'd tried to leave behind. Mom opened the door, her face more haggard than I remembered. She hugged me, but the embrace felt lifeless, like a duty. "Thank you for coming, Ryan," she said, her voice soft. I nodded, forcing a stiff smile. Dad didn't come to greet me. I heard his booming voice from the living room talking about something. Derek was nowhere to be seen, but I wasn't surprised. He was always good at disappearing when things got bad. We stepped into the house. The living room was cramped, the air thick with the stale smell of cigarettes and old beer. A reminder that I didn't belong here. Uncle Carl sat in the corner of the sofa, tapping his knee, his eyes darting away as if afraid of being drawn into the fray. Aunt Ellen, with her over-bleached blonde hair, sat upright in an armchair, lips pursed tightly, her sharp gaze scanning everyone like she was judging a play. Other relatives, Uncle George, Aunt Linda, and a few faces I vaguely remembered were scattered around the room. Some whispered to each other, others stared at the floor as if they knew what was coming but wanted no part in it. Dad sat in his armchair, a beer in hand, his gaze as cold as it was the day I left 20 years ago. "So you finally showed up," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Thought you were too busy playing hero out there." I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. "Mom said Derek's in trouble," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on?" Dad snorted, slamming his beer glass on the table with a thud. "Your brother's in a bit of a mess. Gambling debts, $1 million. The lenders aren't messing around. We need money, and you're the only one in this family who can handle it." My blood ran hot. $1 million? What had Derek done with that kind of money? And why, once again, was I the one called back to clean up his mess? Melissa squeezed my hand under the table, her fingers pressing gently as if to remind me to stay calm. But inside, a storm was brewing. I knew this meeting wasn't just about figuring out how to save Derek, as Mom had said. It was a trap, a way for my parents to drag me back into the role of the sacrificial son they'd always forced me to play. And I knew if I wasn't careful, everything I'd built, our apartment, my life with Melissa, my freedom, would be sucked into the black hole that was the Whitmore family. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "I get it, but where's Derek? If this is his problem, why isn't he here explaining himself?" The room fell silent, save for the creaking of the ceiling fan. Uncle Carl cleared his throat, glancing at Aunt Ellen as if hoping she'd say something, but she just raised an eyebrow, crossed her arms, and looked away. Mom shifted slightly but said nothing. Dad's lips curled into a cold smile. "Same old Ryan," he said, "always looking to point fingers. Derek's out there trying to fix things. But you're the eldest. You have to step up. That's your responsibility." Responsibility. The word cut into my heart like a knife. I glanced at Melissa, who was still holding my hand, her eyes steady but tinged with worry. "My responsibility?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I left this place 20 years ago and built my own life. I don't owe Derek, or anyone in this room, anything. Derek made his debts, let him pay them." Mom gasped softly, her voice trembling. "Ryan, how can you say that? Derek's your brother." But before I could respond, Dad shot to his feet, slamming his beer glass on the table, the clink of glass on wood ringing like a warning. "Who do you think you are?" he roared. "Some grunt soldier who thinks he's hot stuff because he's got a little apartment in Colorado? You carry the Whitmore name, Ryan. You don't turn your back on family." He turned to the room, his voice dripping with theatrics. "Listen to him. The eldest son who doesn't know duty. Everyone hear this. Ryan's going to mortgage his apartment to get the money to save Derek. That's how we keep the Whitmore name honorable." His words exploded in my head like a bomb. Mortgage our apartment, the home Melissa and I had poured our sweat, tears, and sleepless nights into? My blood boiled, my hands clenching into fists. "No," I said, my voice low but icy. "That apartment belongs to me and Melissa. We worked our asses off for it. No one in this room has the right to demand I give it up. Derek made his debts. Let him deal with them." The room erupted in murmurs. Uncle Carl looked up, his face flushed, muttering something to Aunt Linda, but his voice was too low to make out. Aunt Ellen let out a sharp laugh, her high-pitched voice cutting through the air. "Oh, Ryan, still stubborn as ever, huh? You think you're a hero, but you're just a soldier who can't put family first." I turned to her, anger surging. "Family? You call this a family? People who only take and never give back?" Her jaw dropped, but she didn't respond, just crossed her arms tighter, glaring at me like I'd insulted the entire lineage. Uncle Carl finally spoke, his voice shaky, as if afraid of angering Dad further. "Ryan, calm down. We just want to help Derek. He's blood. You can't turn your back on him." But his words were weak, unconvincing, and I saw Aunt Linda tug his sleeve, whispering, "Stay out of it, Carl." The other relatives stayed silent, eyes glued to the floor as if they wanted to vanish from the room. Their silence made me feel more alone than ever, but it also reminded me I didn't need their approval. Dad stepped closer, his face red with rage. "You dare talk to me like that?" he growled, gripping an empty beer bottle. "You think you're better than Derek because you've got some Master Sergeant title? Derek's your blood. If he dies because of those lenders, can you live with that on your conscience?" I stood up, facing him, refusing to back down. "Derek's not my kid. I'm not his father, and I won't let his mistakes ruin my life." That's when things spiraled out of control. "Enough!" Dad bellowed, and before I could react, he grabbed the beer bottle from the table and hurled it at me. The glass flew through the air like a bullet, slamming into my forehead. Pain seared through me like lightning tearing through my skull. I staggered, warm blood streaming down my face, dripping onto the floor. For a moment, the world blurred, leaving only the pounding of my heart and Melissa's scream, "Ryan, oh my God, are you okay?" She rushed to me, her trembling hands touching the wound, her voice breaking with anger and fear. "What are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" But it wasn't just the pain in my head. A tidal wave of emotion surged, tearing down the walls I'd built to protect myself. I saw young Ryan again, 15, being called useless by Dad when Derek broke the vase. I saw Mom's silent stares, choosing Derek over me. I saw the nights in Iraq, wondering if I'd survive to prove I wasn't a nobody soldier. And now, standing here, blood running down my face, I realized this family had never changed. They still saw me as a tool, someone to blame, to use. But this time, I wasn't the scared kid anymore. I was Ryan Whitmore, who'd survived war, years of loneliness, and I wouldn't let them drag me down. I looked up, locking eyes with Dad. He was panting, his hand still clenched, his gaze defiant, as if daring me to say I deserved it. Mom covered her mouth, eyes red, but she said nothing, didn't stand, didn't come near me. Uncle Carl muttered something, maybe, "God, Douglas, calm down," but his voice was weak, as if he feared making Dad angrier. Aunt Ellen stood, stepping to the corner, muttering, "I told you we shouldn't have called Ryan back." As if my presence caused all this. The other relatives sat there, eyes on the floor, none daring to defend me. Their silence was another blade cutting deeper than the bottle. Melissa pulled me out of the room, her voice trembling but resolute. "We're leaving, Ryan. Now." I let her lead me to the door, my steps heavy, blood still dripping onto my shirt. In my head, a voice rang clear. "You don't belong here, you never did." As we reached the yard, I heard Mom call after me, "Ryan, wait." But I didn't turn back. The door slammed behind us, a declaration that I was done with this place. In the car, Melissa wiped the blood from my face with a cloth, her hands shaking but gentle. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes red. I looked at her, the woman who'd stood by me through every storm, and forced a smile, though the pain in my head and heart tore at me. "I'm fine," I said, but we both knew I was lying. I wasn't fine. The bottle didn't just draw blood, it shattered any lingering hope that my family could change. But looking into Melissa's eyes, I knew I wasn't alone. She was my family, my real family. And I'd fight to protect the life we'd built, no matter the cost. Melissa started the car, but before driving off, she grabbed my hand, squeezing tightly. "They don't deserve you, Ryan," she said, her voice firm. "They don't deserve you or what you've accomplished. We'll get through this together." I looked at her, and for a moment, amid the pain and anger, I felt a flicker of hope. She was my family, my true family. And I knew whatever came next, I wouldn't let Rockford drag me down again. As the car pulled away from Chestnut Street, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it vanished. But the image of Dad throwing the bottle, his cold stare, and the complicit silence of everyone else burned in my mind. I knew this wasn't the end. They wouldn't let me go easily. But I also knew this time, I wouldn't let them win. That night, in a small hotel on the outskirts of Rockford, I sat in an armchair by the window, staring out at the foggy highway. My head still throbbed, the wound on my forehead bandaged by Melissa, but the sting of humiliation and anger clawed at my heart. Melissa sat on the bed quietly checking her phone, but I knew she was worried about me. "You need to get some sleep, Ryan," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Tomorrow we'll make a plan. We'll figure this out." "Figure it out?" I let out a bitter laugh. "How, Mel?" "They want our apartment. They want everything we've bled for. And not one person in that room stood up for me." I turned away, not wanting her to see my eyes welling up. But Melissa stood, came to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "They're not your family, Ryan," she said firmly. "I'm your family. Our apartment, our life. That's your family. Don't let them take that away." Her words cut through the fog in my mind like a beacon. She was right. I'd let the Whitmores define me for too long, let their mockery and contempt trap me in the role of the sacrificial son. No more. I'd survived battlefields, sleepless nights in the military, and 20 years of standing on my own. I wouldn't let them drag me down. "I'll find a way," I said, taking her hand. "I won't let them touch our life." The next morning, I took action. First, I needed to know exactly what was going on with Derek and why Dad was so confident in demanding I mortgage our apartment. I contacted an old Army buddy, Jake, now a private investigator in Chicago. Jake had a sharp mind and a knack for digging up information no one else could. "What do you need me to find, Ryan?" he asked over the phone, sounding alert despite my call at 7 in the morning. "Everything about Derek," I said. "Debts, deals, anything tied to my family. I need to know what they're hiding." Jake didn't ask questions, just said, "Give me 3 days. You'll have answers." I hung up, feeling like I'd fired the first shot in a war I couldn't afford to lose. While waiting for Jake, Melissa and I returned to Colorado Springs. Our apartment was the same, faint coffee aroma, sunlight streaming through the window, the old rug Melissa loved. But this time, stepping inside didn't bring the usual peace. I felt like a soldier returning from battle carrying invisible wounds. Melissa sensed it. She pulled me to the sofa, pressing a mug of hot tea into my hands. "We'll get through this, Ryan," she said. "But you need to tell me everything. Don't keep it inside." I told her everything, from the days Dad called me useless, Mom's silent complicity, to Derek's smug grin every time I was pushed to the sidelines. Melissa listened without interrupting, her grip on my hand tightening. When I finished, she said, "They were wrong to treat you like that. But you're not that helpless kid in that house anymore. You're Ryan Whitmore, the strongest man I know. And I'll be here no matter what happens." 3 days later, Jake called back. "Brace yourself, Ryan," he said, his tone grave. "I found some stuff and you're not gonna like it." My heart pounded, but I told him to go on. Jake revealed that Derek wasn't just in gambling debt. He'd borrowed money from a Chicago gang, the kind who didn't hesitate to use violence to collect. But what chilled me was the rest of the story. "Your parents," Jake said, "they used your name to take out a loan 10 years ago while you were in Iraq. A bank loan, about $50,000 with a forged signature. They told the bank you agreed to co-sign, but no one ever told you, right?" I felt the ground collapse beneath me. "What?" I whispered, gripping the phone. They used my name?" Jake sighed. "Yeah. And there's more. Derek sold a piece of land inherited from your grandmother. Land that was supposed to belong to both of you. He cut your name out of the deed with your parents' consent. They said you didn't care about family, so you didn't deserve a share." My blood boiled, my head burning with rage. I wasn't just betrayed, I was robbed of what was rightfully mine, deceived by the people I called family. Melissa, sitting beside me, overheard the call on speakerphone. Her face paled, but her eyes flashed with anger. "They can't do that to you," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "We have to do something, Ryan. Now." I contacted a lawyer in Colorado Springs, Linda Harper, a sharp woman with over 20 years of experience handling property disputes. I sent her everything Jake had uncovered, the forged loan documents, the land sale contract, and Derek's debt records. "This is serious, Mr. Whitmore," Ms. Harper said when we met at her office. "A forged signature is fraud, and excluding you from the inheritance without your consent is illegal. We can sue them and I'll make sure you're compensated." I nodded, but it wasn't relief I felt. I didn't want money. I wanted justice. I wanted them to pay for what they'd done to me. "I want to cut all ties with them," I said. "Financial, legal, everything. I don't want them to have any claim on my life anymore." Ms. Harper gave a cold smile. "Very well. I'll draft a legal notice declaring you free of any obligations tied to the Whitmore family. If they try to interfere, we'll take them to court." A week later, the legal notice was delivered to the house on Chestnut Street via courier. I wasn't there, but I could imagine Dad's face as he read it. The letter, written in Ms. Harper's sharp legalese, was clear. "Ryan Whitmore hereby terminates all financial and legal responsibilities related to the Whitmore family. Any unauthorized use of his identity or assets will result in legal action." I pictured Mom crying, Dad slamming the table, and Derek, if he was there, shrugging as always. But this time I didn't care. I was done with them. The next day, Jake called from Chicago, his voice carrying a rare hint of humor mixed with gravity. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Ryan," he said. "Derek's been nabbed. The lenders found him at a casino on the city's outskirts trying to gamble his way out of debt. He's in custody now, awaiting trial for fraud and debt evasion. But the bigger news is your parents. They mortgaged the house on Chestnut Street to pay off Derek's debts, scraping together $200,000. Guess what? It's still not enough. The lenders want the full $1 million, and now your parents are facing foreclosure." I sank onto the sofa in our apartment, phone pressed to my ear, a cold gust sweeping through me. My parents had mortgaged the house, the sanctuary Dad always boasted about, where he claimed the Whitmore name would forever be respected. I pictured him in the living room, his proud gaze now reduced to desperation. Mom, probably wiping tears, muttering about keeping the family together. But they'd chosen Derek, poured everything into the spoiled brother, and now they were paying the price. "Anything else, Jake?" I asked, my voice dry. Jake sighed. "The Rockford community's buzzing. Your Aunt Ellen's been telling the neighborhood your parents were wrong to indulge Derek. Uncle Carl's avoiding everyone, ashamed of being at that meeting. The relatives don't gather at your house anymore. They say the Whitmores have lost face. Your parents are practically outcasts now." I nodded, though Jake couldn't see. I didn't feel smug, but I didn't feel guilty either. They'd dug their own grave, and I was no longer the one to fill it. I hung up, staring out the apartment window. Colorado sunlight streamed in, illuminating the old rug Melissa loved. She walked in, carrying a tray of tea and freshly baked cookies, the faint vanilla scent softening the air. "Jake called?" she asked, setting the tray on the table. I recounted everything: Derek's arrest, my parents' mortgaged house falling short, and their tarnished reputation in Rockford. When I mentioned the Chestnut Street house, Melissa shook her head, her eyes flashing with rare anger. "They made their choice, Ryan," she said. "They chose Derek. Chose that hollow pride, and now they've lost everything. You're not responsible for this." I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her small fingers. "I know," I said, "but part of me still feels empty. I thought I could let go of the past, but it keeps clinging to me." Melissa looked at me, her gaze soft but resolute. "The past doesn't define you, Ryan. You built this life, we built it, and I won't let anyone, not even your family, take that away." Her words were a fire warming my heart. I pulled her close, holding her tightly, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. Melissa was my real family, not the people in Rockford. She was the one who stood by me through sleepless nights haunted by calls for money, through the grueling days we worked to buy this apartment. She was the reason I didn't collapse when that beer bottle hit my head, when my entire family turned their backs. "Thank you," I whispered, "for not giving up on me." We returned to our routine at Fort Carson. I went back to the base, leading my team, guiding young soldiers through grueling training. Colonel Harris clapped my shoulder when I returned, his sharp but warm gaze meeting mine. "Good to have you back, Whitmore," he said. "This team needs you. Don't let personal stuff distract you." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Here I was, Master Sergeant Whitmore, respected for what I did, not the name I carried. Each day at the base reminded me I'd built a life to be proud of, without needing approval from my parents or anyone in Rockford. But Rockford didn't let go easily. Mom called a few times, leaving long, rambling voicemails. "Ryan, I'm sorry about the meeting," she said in one, her voice trembling. "But we're losing everything. The house, the bank will take it if we don't pay up. Derek needs you. I'm begging you, Ryan." I listened but didn't respond. Part of me wanted to scream that she was wrong, that she and Dad had chosen Derek over me my whole life, that their house wasn't my burden. But I deleted the messages, letting silence speak for me. Dad called once, his voice hoarse, lacking its usual arrogance. "You think you've won, Ryan?" he said. "You're abandoning your family, your blood. You'll regret it when you have no one left." I hung up without a word. He was wrong. I had Melissa, the soldiers at Fort Carson who saw me as a brother, a life I'd built with blood and sweat. I didn't need the Whitmore name to feel worthy. Melissa and I started talking about the future for the first time unshadowed by Rockford. One evening we sat on our apartment balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Melissa spread a map on the table, pointing to Oregon's coast. "What do you think about a little house here?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Near the ocean, where we can hear the waves every morning. No one from Rockford will find us." I smiled, picturing us in a wooden house with a porch facing the sea. "Sounds perfect," I said. "A fresh start, just you and me." We decided to save for a coastal home after my retirement, planned in 2 years. Melissa scoured online photos of Oregon's beaches, showing me houses with red-tiled roofs and big windows. "We'll have a swing on the porch," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "And a small garden where I can grow flowers." I laughed, pulling her close. "Whatever you want, I'll make it happen," I said. And this time I believed it. One weekend we drove to a real estate fair in Colorado Springs where a booth promoted coastal homes. The agent, a friendly middle-aged woman, showed us a model of a small house in Newport, Oregon. 3 bedrooms, a wide porch, and a 5-minute walk to the beach, she said. Melissa squeezed my hand, her eyes gleaming like a child's. "Can you imagine, Ryan? Waking up to the sound of waves, no more calls from Rockford?" I nodded, feeling a new door opening before us. On the drive back, Melissa turned on the radio, an old country song playing, and we sang along, laughing like Rockford. The beer bottle and the begging calls never existed. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, like I'd shed iron shackles. My family, my parents with their mortgaged house, Derek with his debts and troubles, were no longer my weight to carry. They'd chosen their path and I'd chosen mine. One evening, as the Colorado sunset painted the sky red, I pulled out my old notebook, the one that had followed me since enlistment. It was filled with notes, training schedules, battle plans, fleeting thoughts from long nights in the field. I opened a blank page, picked up a pen, and wrote, "They called me a nobody soldier. They said I lacked leadership, wasn't worthy of the Whitmore name. They mortgaged their house to save Derek, but they failed, just as they failed me. But I'm the one who stood up to protect what matters. I built this life from nothing, from sleepless nights, from days of blood and sweat. From now on, I live not for anyone's approval. I live for me, for Melissa, for the seaside home where we'll write our own story." I closed the notebook, set it on the table, and stepped onto the balcony. Melissa was there, looking out at the city. She turned, smiled, and I pulled her into my arms. Under the sunset, I knew that no matter how painful the past, the future was ours. Rockford, with all its scars and memories, was now just a faint speck in the rearview mirror of my life. And I, at last, was free.